Thanks, Nuala, and thanks, Louise. Thanks very much for being asked to present today from Coiltte's point of view, and I suppose learning their experiences that we've seen. And I suppose I'm no entomologist. I suppose my experiences come from talking to contractors, foresters, practical experience on the ground. And I suppose that's where it's gained, and working in, I suppose, the forestry industry for over 8 years now. So I've gained a good I suppose, expertise from that. So I suppose what I'm going to talk about today is Helobius abies, Coiltte's practices, I suppose the practical experiences we see, and then the future developments that we have been trained there with both the UK and ourselves here in Ireland with companies. So I hope to talk about that today. So I suppose weevil is one of the, it's a major threat facing forestry in Ireland. I suppose from the point of view of crop protection and protecting trees, and then tree losses because of weevil. I suppose Coillte spend over 2 million, circa 2 million every year on the control of weevil in crops, and that's both I suppose on reforestation, mainly crops. And I suppose that's important to say. That doesn't include filling in. I suppose it's hard to quantify filling in damage from weevil. So 2 million per annum, circa, we spend. I suppose what we see then is the population is adapting and increasing, and then the adaptability of weevil is definitely they're a strong pest, and I suppose they're adapting to the climate we have in Ireland as well. And then I suppose as Louise alluded to, alternative protection methods are I suppose a challenge. From physical protection methods and even biological control methods, I suppose it is proven a challenge and to get them protection methods, alternatives to chemicals really. So it is a big figure, 2 million to protect crops against weevil in the Coillte estate. So I suppose to talk about the variables and where we see the highest population of weevil in sites and in reforestation sites, the number one is peat. Peat soils. Then I suppose we have pine itself. So a percentage of pine was clearfelled off the site originally. The third one then is the dense amount of clearfells we had in the last, since 2018, we had an amount of clearfells in our estate. And then the other is elevation. So they're the four variables, and certainly not limited to that, but that's where we see the highest populations of weevil in crops. And I suppose that's based on feedback from foresters, forest managers, and I suppose contractors as well. So it is I suppose following on from that, and to give you an indication of the national view in the Coillte estate. So we've over 300,000 hectares of peat. I suppose this is framing it. I suppose we have 300,000 hectares of peat soils spread across the country from I suppose from Donegal back down to Cork and over to Wicklow. I suppose we have the Stacks Mountains up into the Slivachties, and then I suppose across into the silver mines, and then the Blue Stack Mountains up in Donegal, as well as the Wicklow Mountains as well. So a big spread of peat across the country, attracting weevil. We'd over 29,000 hectares of clearfells in 2018. And then I suppose the third one then is the amount of lodgepole pine. So I pulled out lodgepole pine, south coastal, pure crops, where the major species is LPS. So we've over 39,000 hectares of pine across the country as well. So that's just framing, I suppose, I suppose where the areas you can see in red is the areas of lodgepole pine, and where the weevil population is high. And I suppose that's backed up by contractors, foresters, and I suppose managers talking to them across the country. So this, I suppose, picture depicts where chemical or protection activities are planned for the next few years, and even activities that are already done, looking at protection of weevil across the estate. So it is vast, and it's from every part of the country, and mainly in them four variable areas. So I suppose from the point of view of certification, I suppose we've are under the umbrella of FSC and PEFC. I suppose from an FSC point of view, we adhere to the pesticide policy and their principles. I suppose integrated pest management is one of the key parts of this. I suppose there's 3 steps to it. I suppose step one is to highlight the problem. What is the problem? So weevil is the problem. Step two then is what action do we take? Do we take no action? Do we avoid the problem, and then do we take remedial action? I suppose it's just around if we have to take remedial action, it's how do we reduce and I suppose look at the response to protecting the weevil. So we've chemical methods is the vast majority we use, and I suppose there's ongoing research, as Louise alluded to, into biological control and physical protection methods for protecting crops against weevil. But I suppose the vast majority is chemical methods. So under that, I suppose the umbrella of highly hazardous pesticides. So we use two chemicals, acetamiprid and chlorantraniliprole, which are two active ingredients we use in Ireland for protecting crops against weevil. I suppose from an integrated pest management point of view, Coillte use two different methods, and I suppose also a third method would be green planting, and hot planting would be I suppose getting in before the weevil population comes on site. So the number one integrated pest management method we use is stump hacking. So stump hacking is I suppose assessing stumps within a reforestation site. Generally from 12 months onwards, we'd go in and assess the stumps. A quarter of the stump would be assessed. We'd look at the amount of larvae and the amount of pupae. So I don't know, can you see my cursor there? But the pupae is you can see a weevil formation in the middle picture there, and then the larvae is to the far right. So we'd assess the stumps and see what percentage of them is in it. We'd count the number of each in the stump, and if we assessed and there was more than 5 weevil within the stumps, that quarter stump, then we would say that spraying or control methods may be required. And then if there was less than 5 weevil, we'd say it may not need a spray, and it's to come back again and reassess the stumps and I suppose revisit the site and assess the stumps again to see if a chemical control method is needed to protect the crop. This is widely used by contractors with good results. I suppose it's a great management tool for contractors to I suppose forecast the number of weevil across the sites and forecast what crops or what areas they would have to think about weevil spraying. It gives a great indication of the population that may come out from sites as well. Then we use the decision support tool. I suppose this is a tool to I suppose assess the site if we're going to have a low, moderate or high weevil outbreak, and I suppose is to look at if we go in straight in after clearfill, which is our current strategy, and it's working very positively at the minute. Green planting or hot planting is to get in as soon as after clearfill as possible, and I suppose that's having a very positive effect on combating weevil. It reduces our chemical very much so that we're getting in with trees before the weevil and the trees getting established, a good root collar diameter. And I suppose the tree then is well established before the outbreak of weevil comes onto site. And I suppose this gives also an indication to contractors on how to assess their sites and how to monitor the crops and what to do. So they find that quite useful in combating weevil on sites as well. I suppose it also gives the forester an indication of whether to dip trees in nurseries as also. I suppose a lot of the trees are commonly dipped with acetamiprid to protect crops also, with very good results there with that. So I suppose there are integrated pest management tools. I suppose integrated pest management also is green planting. As I said, it's very positive results there as well with green planting. Then once we complete a chemical spraying or activity on site, we complete chemical usage forms. So I suppose this records the area the chemical was covered or applied. It covers the active ingredient that was used, the hectares that the chemical was applied over. And then it gives the date of application, the number of people involved and the names of them and the hours and the PP. I suppose that's just for, I suppose, to record every bit of chemical we use across the estate as well. So that's done for every site, every activity, chemical usage, and it's not limited to weevil. We both do herbicide and fertilizer also. So I suppose to give you a background to the two active ingredients we use, so we use acetamiprid and chlorantraniliprole. So the common names, Ceta SG or Gazelle SG or acetamiprid. And then chlorantraniliprole is a liquid form. It's Coragen is the common name there. Both applied with a knapsack sprayer. The Gazelle or Ceta, 460 grams per hectare. So that's granular. And then I suppose chlorantraniliprole is 175 mils per hectare. So I suppose we got off-label approval for them from PRCD or the Department of Agriculture. That's to use, I suppose the maximum amount of doses we can use on one given site in a given year is 2. It's either a dip or a top-up or 2 top-ups, depending on if you dip your trees originally or not. And then I suppose it's important to stress as well, they're systematic, so I suppose they're not a repellent. I suppose the chemicals are generally used in the horticulture or agricultural industry to combat, I suppose, biting or suckling pests, mainly aphids, and I suppose it's then it has both chemicals. The weevil actually has to have a physical bite out of the tree before it controls them or kills them. So it's important to stress it's different to cyclomethrine, that is not a repellent. And I suppose the positives of that is we're reducing the population on site, that we're not having the effect of them weevil continually attacking the tree over and over. That we're actually combating the population of sites or population of weevil on given reforest sites as well. So I suppose the bottom right there as well is the chemical sign. So I suppose we put that up on each site that a top-up spray is completed in. I suppose that's just to protect the public from picking, I suppose, fruit or fungicides on site as well. So there are 2 chemicals we use. We're finding positive results with them. I suppose in the high population areas as well, it definitely is reducing the population and combating the high population in these sites also. So I suppose from the experiences and trends we see, so as I said, and I have to reiterate the point, green planting is having a huge positive. It's getting in before the weevil cycle. And getting trees established, and then they have a good root collar diameter before the weevil come out and weevil attack the trees. And I suppose it's important to also say is to get the right tree when you plant first, and I suppose I didn't cover in the earlier slide, is to plant a good grade 1 and a good root collar diameter. It gives the tree a great protection method against the weevil also. I suppose weevil are adapting to the climate, and I suppose Louise alluded to it earlier as well. They're adapting to the climate. We even had records of weevil come out in early March last year, and they shoved into November in research plots we did with my colleagues down there in B6, which would be Cork Kerry. We saw weevil up into November there, and I suppose. And to give you a background to them sites, I suppose some of my project colleagues are here today. I suppose we did trials on the different chemicals, Coragen and Ceta, and I suppose we did 5 different sites, different fell times. We did in when we'd expect high weevil populations on site and when we wouldn't expect, so we went in straight after clear fells. Only one site, I suppose, was attacked fully by weevil and it was wiped out. In the first few weeks, and I suppose that was in around the 18-month clear fell time, and I suppose the weevil hit it hard. We had a high population on that site. It was a pine original, a spruce pine clear fell originally, so we found high populations there. The other 4 sites, very minimal damage. They were all green planting and getting in after the harvester. So it was having a huge positive there. And I suppose that backs up green planting is positive as well. Filling in trees, frost damaged trees. And I suppose this is talking to contractors as well. If you don't dip a fill-in tree or you don't treat a fill-in tree, and you fill it in the second or third year, they'll hit that fill-in tree the hardest. It will be wiped out. So they have a tendency to hit the tree that's mostly in stress. Definitely they hit them the hardest. Flyers then, I suppose, it's definitely one that's questionable. I suppose flyers, do they fly or do they not fly? And I hope more research is done into that in the coming years. There's population on site that we can't understand, and they're not coming out of the stumps. So I'd like to see more research into that area of flying weevil and where they come from. Do they come from neighbouring clearfields and that? So I suppose then to round it up, from the future development point of view, we're closely involved with the Helobius group in the UK. So we're looking into alternative active ingredients or alternative chemicals, and also non-chemical methods, both physical and biological controls. I suppose you can see there in the middle, that's Multi-Pro Guard. It's a paper-based guard that's applied to the end of the tree, and the idea is that the weevil can't attack the tree. And I suppose these trials are still ongoing and they're early days, with positive results seen last October, and we hope to see more results this year, possibly in October as well. And I suppose then the far right is Coniflex. This is a Swedish company. It's a natural resin mixed with sand. I suppose this is applied to trees in the UK as well, as a protective method, and it's a totally natural product. So we're very interested to see what results come out of these two non-chemical methods or physical barriers in the coming months and even years, and we're hoping for positive results out of that. And as Louise said, Spotta is a UK company. I suppose colleagues from the project team are here today. We have a project running on the monitoring of weevil activity within sites. So we have them mainly based in Cork and Kerry down south. I suppose you can see the pod there on the left. So it's a monitoring tool. It monitors the activity of weevil within a site. And I suppose it'll be interesting to see the results from the point of view of neighbouring clearfells, the population of sites or population of weevil on sites, and then I suppose also relate that to damage on sites as well. So interesting concept there, an interesting project. It was only rolled out this February, March, so it's in its early days. But I suppose Scottish Forest Service were also looking into this with positive results there as well. So there's a pheromone built into this pod that attracts the weevil in, and I suppose then it actually monitors it through that database. So you can actually see in Derry Knowling there, it's a site 5. You can see the number of weevil there is 254 yesterday I pulled out. So you can see the activity of weevil in them sites, in them pods within the sites. It also takes temperature data as well, which is important to see what temperature and what variables they come out at as well. So interesting concepts there, which we're closely involved with the UK also into research. So that's all for me, so I can take questions. Nuala, yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Colm. Very, very interesting presentation and lots of work being done there. Good to see. Can I just ask maybe before I open it up to the audience here, you mentioned at the beginning there that peat soils, elevation and pine were 3 indicators of places you're more likely to have high populations. And do you think that's to do with stress in the plants or what?
I suppose it's to do with the amount of pine that's in the area and the amount of peat. It definitely, and I suppose in these areas there's an amount of clear fells in these areas as well. So that's and definitely the trees are stressed in them sort of areas as well. In drier periods as well, but yeah, I suppose it's vastly majority to do with pine and high elevation, definitely, you know. Yeah, and the population is just there, and it's like the tide; they keep coming and they keep coming and they keep coming. And I suppose that's from experience with contractors and foresters as well. So there's always a population there. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Colm. Maybe when you ask a question, I might just paraphrase it again, if you don't mind, just to so that everybody can actually hear the question. So, any questions for Colm? I'm sure there are. Yeah. Okay. The question is in relation to the use of CETA and how effective is it, and for how long?
It's very effective. So it is systematic, and it's the tree takes up fairly rapid. And I suppose in the trials we did down in Kerry, we were finding results which is within a few days. I suppose in the trials we did with CETA, we're finding dead weevil the following week. So within days, it was taking it up systematically. and it is quite it's brilliant to keep weevil at bay. But I suppose the effect of high weevil populations on site, you will have damage, and you will have damage to the root colour diameter. But I suppose in lower population sites, it's very effective. Within days, you would be finding dead weevil and protection against trees. Yeah.
Okay, the question is that Coillte have off-label approval to use herbicides, and would that also apply to the private forestry sector?
Yeah. So it's PRCD approval, so it's Department of Agriculture. So the answer would be yes. Yep. Yeah, it's PRCD approved. Yeah.
Okay, the question is, how often should you monitor a site for weevil damage?
So I suppose spot is in early days. This gives activity of weevil on the site. So I suppose we don't have concrete research into when or where. We're constantly monitoring that device. But I suppose from the point of view of when contractors should monitor sites, I suppose when you have from April onwards, they will be monitoring sites regularly, doing their stump hacking, doing their assessments on site. So fairly regularly, every 2 to 3 weeks. And I suppose stump hacking gives an indication of how far the weevil is on and within the stumps. So I suppose if they're at pupae stage and you can actually see a forming weevil within the stumps, then you would want to be thinking about rapidly getting in and getting sprayed your sites, that the weevil will emerge from the stumps fairly rapid. So contractors would be monitoring fairly regularly during the high peaks period. And I suppose from experience, they know where the high population of weevil will be, and they will target them areas and get out and do their stump hacking and I suppose forecast the numbers that they will have in them sites, and then regularly monitor ongoing. So from a spotter point of view, it's early days yet. I don't have concrete research into that. So yeah.
Okay, the question is, after clear felling, is there anything you could put on the stumps to deter the pine weevil?
Yeah, I suppose nematodes is one that you can spray onto stumps, and I suppose it will attack the weevil larvae within the stumps. I suppose that's one thing. I suppose with clear fells, the amount of residues you have on site after clear fell is quite substantial. You have branches, you have stumps, you have so much material left on site, it's very hard to combat them. But nematodes, I think there is room for more research in that area. We did research in Coillte in 2006. I think Aoife Dillon led that research there. So nematodes at the minute is definitely positive there to look at reducing the population within the stumps. Yeah.
Okay, the question is, how widely used is Coragen? Hopefully I pronounce it, and is it effective in killing the weevil?
Yeah. So Coragen is new to us. It was only introduced, and we only got EAMU this year. So we're planning on doing top-up sprays, and I suppose dipping in nurseries with it also. So not to a great degree yet. I suppose nurseries in Ballintemple dipped a vast amount of trees this year with Coragen, so it's in its early days. I suppose to give you a protection method in our trials is 10% better than CETA is what we saw in research. So it is marginally better. It is the same act, and so it is systematic. And I suppose it is the weevil have to take a bite out of the tree also to control the weevil. So I suppose it's early days, but in the research early days, it's marginally better. No.
The question there was, is there a price difference?
When I priced it last, there isn't. It's minimal between the two. Yeah.
Okay, so 2 questions for Colm there. One on relation to the amount of chemical being used in Donegal being particularly low, and is that due to the level of clear fell? And the second one then, the trials that you're carrying out, are they on treated plants or untreated plants?
So I suppose the slide I put up is activities planned for the next few years. So that's the amount of weevil activity control methods we have in the next few years. They do control weevil vastly in Donegal. I suppose talking to contractors they do. But I suppose that's the activities that are planned in the next couple of years within Donegal. And I suppose if you look at the Blue Stacks Mountains, the amount of clear fells there, they're pushing towards green planting also. Up in that area as well, so that's having a huge positive on the amount of activity, chemical sprays we've planned in the next couple of years up north. I suppose the second question was around
was on the trials. Are you using treated or untreated plants?
Yeah, so there was 5 different methods. One was uncontrolled. The second then was Cetia Pure. The third was Coragen. The fourth was Cetia mixed with Wetsit, which is an adjuvant. And then the fifth was dipped. By far, I suppose, in our trials in that site in Kerry, by far the dip plants was the best control method. I suppose the amount of failures we had, we had failures obviously because of the population we had on site, but it was outperformed all the rest, which is a positive as well, you know. And I suppose Coragen and Cetia, I suppose they're systematic. It's I suppose applied in nurseries at a controlled basis. So when it comes on site, the active ingredient is minimal. It's actually taken in by the tree. Whereas, so that, I suppose that's having a positive impact is dipping definitely on sites as well, you know. So yeah.